Hello, my name is James Arroyo, and today we are going to be talking about Chapter 4 Listening. Listening is one of those things that we tend to take for granted. It is one of those things that we sort of see as something that we do along with other things. We drive the car and we listen to the radio. We are listening to music while we run, while we do dishes, while we listen to other people while we are checking our phone. But listening is one of those things that is so important to build relationships, but it is something that we tend not to think about a lot and therefore we tend to suffer with. Along with any type of multitasking, it is not doing two things at once. It is instead toggling between two things very quickly. So today we're going to be talking about some of the ways to improve our listening, why listening is important, as well as the stages of listening. So let's begin. So, why is learning about listening important? First, it builds relationships through respect and trust. Number one, listening shows respect because it is saying that I am listening to you because I respect what you have to say. I know that what you're going to say is something that I can use. Just like if I don't listen to someone, then it communicates that I do not respect. And along with respect comes trust. Trust that this person is going to listen to me. Also, it gives us knowledge that we would not be able to otherwise acquire. Think back to a any class. Do you remember all of it? Probably not. But if we improve our listening skills even slightly, we will be able to improve our retention of a lot of these concepts and therefore be able to learn a lot more. Also, it creates a better understanding of those around us, leading to more social capital. A lot of times we think of persuasion as I am proving this other person wrong, when that is not actually the case at all. In fact, persuasion is more akin to understanding the other side and finding areas where we can agree, slowly converting the other person to your side. So, how do we learn about other people? Through listening and understanding their worldview, and then using that knowledge to better apply your persuasive appeal. And it also helps us improve our critical listening skills so we are not persuaded by faulty logic. If we are listening at a peripheral level where we're not really listening, then it is a lot easier for us to be persuaded by things that we should maybe not be persuaded by. And one that I kind of like is you already know what you know, or you already know what you think. Has anyone been in a conflict where it has gotten really heated and you're arguing back and forth and it just seems like the other person just isn't listening? I'm sure that that has been the case. I don't know about you, but I've definitely had those experiences. But we have to take a step back and think, what am I really gaining in this situation? I already know what I know, so why is it my main goal in this conversation to get my point across? That really shouldn't be my ultimate goal because that has already I already understand what I think. It's now time for me to understand what the other person thinks. And in so doing, then you can adapt your message to be more impactful. There are some dangers of poor listening, of us listening poorly for any. The big one is a negative impact on the speaker. During speeches in this class, how will someone's poor listening impact us? If someone, or if anyone's ever, oh, I don't know, been talking to someone and they're, checking their phone, it affects us. It communicates a lack of respect and a lack of trust, or makes me trust less. So unlike TV, where we can just go off and do our own thing, with listening to public speeches in this class, we really want to support the people here and show them respect and show them trust so that they are better able to communicate their message. Also, since this is a process-oriented behavior of listening, it can have a negative impact on communication as a whole, and because of that, the relationship suffers. And when the relationship suffers, then communication deteriorates throughout the relationship. Also, we have some message distortions. We can omit certain information or feel like we've missed things that have already been said. Not in this class, but in previous classes, there have been message distortions when I've communicated all the requirements for a certain assignment that people may feel like, well, I totally missed, I don't remember that ever being said. Also, there are additions. Occurs when listeners add information to what was being said, and then substituting and confusing portions of the message can also happen. And these are big dangers of listening, not just in the micro of small little miscommunications, but even in large situations where, let's say, one organization says that they need a product, and then another organization or a person from that organization listens to that, but distorts that message and therefore sends the wrong product. Millions are lost every year due to small miscommunications like this, which can be improved through better listening skills. But there are many different types of listening. First is appreciative listening. This is listening for pleasure or enjoyment. We listen to this when we are, listening to music, listening to comedy. But has anyone heard of the Rebecca Black song Friday? I'll take that as a yes. So, in that song, is it a good song? Not at all. But the reason why we all know it is because we all know it so bad. And because of that, we gain enjoyment from that experience because we all agree that it is bad. Appreciative listening, a lot of times, is about building a sense of community around shared ideas. So when we all feel like a song is really, really, really good, then we all build community around that. In the same way that if we hear something that's really, 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 really bad, we all build community around that. So this is very much for enjoyment. We also have relational listening. This is listening to provide emotional support. In other words, listening for feelings. A big challenge that comes with this is empathy. We sometimes feel like we can listen empathetically, but we may miss certain parts of that. Let's watch a short video.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Very, very cute. So, the general idea behind this video is that empathy is a listening response. It is understanding what the other person is going through, whereas sympathy is trying to make it better, but more, it's for my own selfish reason of making myself feel better in this scenario. It drives a disconnection, whereas empathy is building connection. And with listening communicates trust and respect. That makes the audience feel better through connection. So I know that we've all experienced times when we've said at least, or any time that we've tried to make the situation better, maybe even by trying to offer some advice. And while that can sometimes be something that we can do after the fact, a while later, it is not something that we should do at the moment. Instead, relational listening through empathy is a lot better. Also, we have informational listening. This is listening to understand the message of the speaker. This is what you may be doing right now. And critical listening is listening to evaluate a message for the purpose of accepting it or rejecting it. If you're going to a used car sales lot, and you're buying a used car, then critical listening may be what you're engaging with at that time, because you are not accepting every single thing that salesman says as true, because there is a common understanding that they may not be as honest as they could be. Along with politics, we may accept or reject what a politician says based on our own worldview, as well as what we already know about the topic. So critical listening is something that is very important. So now we get into listening in general, and there are 5 stages of listening: hearing, selection, interpretation, evaluation, and responding. So we start with hearing, and this is there's an important distinction to be made between hearing and listening. Hearing is the physiological reaction. The sound waves of the vibration of sound waves on the eardrum, then firing electrochemical impulses that then lead to the brain. Whereas listening, it is the process of recognizing, understanding, interpreting, and responding, and not just hearing the words. We want to try to do more listening, but hearing is a vital component of this. Selection, well, actually, sorry. there may be some physiological challenges in result of hearing, but there are ways that we get around this. And while people can still may not be able to hear, for example, the deaf community, while they may not be able to hear, they may be able to listen through recognizing the signs that are being signed to them and interpreting and responding. But it depends on the code that they are using. Then we have selection. We consider all sounds we hear and then choose certain messages on which to focus and which things we could disregard. You could listen to me, or you could be listening to your mother or father in the other, or roommate in the other room, or you could be listening to your phone. You could be selecting a different message out there. Maybe there's a TV going on in another room, and you're listening in on that. So we choose what to listen to. Some challenges of this are preoccupation. We think a lot faster than people can talk, so it is easy to just sort of lose focus. We also have message overload, when the brain has reached the limit of information and we can no longer accept anymore. If anyone has a work email, about how many work emails do you receive a day, a week? If each day you're receiving more than 100 emails, then you may engage in information overload, and as a result, you will be less likely to select information from that channel. And we have avoidance of difficult things. If the discussion is too emotional, intellectual, or complex, the listener may retreat. This happens a lot in complex classes like math or science. If someone feels like they are bad at it, or that it is going to be too difficult, they may retreat and may not listen, and therefore make it a lot harder for themselves. In the same way, if someone has a very visceral emotional reaction when communicating with a specific person in their lives, or in a specific situation in their lives, be it a conflict situation, then they may try to disregard or avoid or retreat from these situations so that they may not have to select it. Then we have interpretation. The listener assigns meanings to understand the speaker's message. So look at the football situation right there. There's a contained blitz, a long scoop, an LB, middle hook match to 3, steam flat match to blah, 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 show overload. All of that's a closed side fire zone. I have no clue what this means, but we learn codes throughout our lives. Think about what is some of the what's some of the language that is exclusive only to your workplace? Do you use radio codes? 87, 10-4, 86, or 10-9? All of these things are a language that other people cannot understand. So we want to be sure that when we're communicating our public speeches, that we are communicating in a very clear way. But this also very much speaks to why language is such an integral part of the human experience. Our language allows us to create or place symbolic meaning onto the world around us. That's why if someone learns the language of football, then they will be able to determine and decipher and place meaning onto the situation better than someone who is not versed in that language. In the same way, I was recently driving with a buddy who is an auto mechanic, and he sees cars going around, and this big car makes a screeching stop, like a stop, but his car screeches a little bit. He automatically was able to decipher that it was because of this one component that may be off in his car and that should probably be checked. Again, since I have no language to describe that, I am not able to create symbolic meaning for that. So that is why it is important to improve our language and thereby be able to better understand the world around us. In the same way, I learn language of communication, so I'm potentially better able to place meaning onto certain communication phenomena. And we have jumping to conclusions. This is listening for part of the message before making faulty or even biased assumptions about the speaker or content of the speech. This is that sort of defensive listening. When someone says something, then you catch that one thing that they said wrong, and then you wait for your turn to talk. And at that point, we may miss a lot of the other message. And sometimes interpretation language or communication defies interpretation. And as a result, this is very much, I think, where art comes in, which is a very valuable part as well. Then we have evaluation. This goes beyond interpreting and then draws conclusions like, is this important? Is this appropriate? Is this true? Is this false? Some challenges of this are gullible listening, where we accept information just simply at face value. That this person said it, therefore it must be true. Also, we have overly critical listening, where we will mentally argue and disagree. This is very much where we get into defensive listening. And then we have self-centered listening, focusing only on how things benefit me. If it doesn't benefit me, then I won't listen. And again, that can diminish relationships. And lastly, we have responding. This is demonstrating comprehension of the message presented. This is an important part because if we do not show that we are listening, then the audience will be, or the person speaking will be affected by that message that you are sending to them. Also, it will diminish the communication situation as a whole, in the singular, and the relationship as a whole. When I used to work at Disney, I found times when there were challenges with guests. How did I handle them? I simply listened. I nodded. I replied what they had already, I paraphrased what they had said. And then I told them exactly what another person had told them, and they were fine with it. A big reason for conflict is because we feel like we are not being listened to, so we attack. We feel disrespected, and therefore we disrespect someone else. So we really want to be sure that we are responding in an effective way so that the audience feels respected and so that they can trust us. Some challenges are negative feedback. This lack of respect may cause the speaker to perform poorly on an assignment. So in other words, what is poor feedback? Checking your phone, maybe talking to someone else, going like, we want to try to avoid these things. And then there's pseudo listening. While pseudo listening or fake listening is polite, we may miss out on potentially valuable information, so we want to be sure that we are actually listening. Now let's talk about how to improve. Passive listening is listening without being engaged, whereas active listening is listening while being engaged. This is simple, this is obvious, but the reason why we make this distinction is because active listening is not that hard in the short term. We can be engaged for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, maybe even for 15 minutes, but for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30, 50, 3 hours, that is a lot more challenging. So we want to be sure that we are flexing these muscles and strengthening these active listening muscles so that we are better able to stay engaged and not lose sight of valuable information and maintain social relationships. Active listening is composed of active listening in the mind and in the body. We start with the 3 A's of active listening, though. We want to be sure that we are actually paying attention, selecting that certain information. We also have to keep in mind our attitudes of the situation. Be it a conflict situation, what sort of attitudes could we have? If we have very negative attitudes about it, if we feel like it's going to automatically devolve into an argument, or maybe that it is synonymous with an argument, that is an attitude, then we may approach these conflict situations in a way that it is either aggressive or in a way that we will just avoid the situation entirely. And the same thing goes for people. We all have those people that maybe we do not listen to as much as we should. A good example of this is, younger siblings. Yeah, I probably don't listen to the, 5-year-old sibling because I have lived for quite a bit longer, and therefore a lot of what they say I have probably already figured out. Not everything, but most things. And then we want to be sure that we are adjusting our listening skills. We will find times when we are not doing the best active listening as possible, so we want to be sure that we're adjusting to these situations. So, active listening in the mind is deciding that it is time to listen, focusing your listening, avoid jumping to a conclusion, and a good way to do this is by looking for common ground, by trying to find ways that we agree. That way we both feel listened to. Active listening in the body is important as well. Body language is a great way to show that you are listening without saying a word. What is this listening position? Maybe leaning forward instead of leaning back. Using positive responsive facial expressions. Leaning your head slightly to the left, opening your eyes slightly larger than than you usually do, and then nod every once in a while. That can show active listening. Be a supportive listener. You want to follow the basic rules of courtesy. Treat others how you would like to be treated. Would you like to have an audience that is engaged and listening and excited to hear what you have to say, or an audience that turns off their video and goes into the other room and eats, a burrito? Chipotle is amazing. We definitely want we want the former, not the latter. So we want to be sure that we are we're engaging in active listening with our body. And that is all. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you next time for the next chapter.